But aside from that, also we've had these remarkable strikes by Ukraine in the Black Sea. Now, the skeptics or pro-Putinists will say, well, the sinking of a couple of tankers doesn't change the overall trajectory of the war, but doesn't it demonstrate a core lacking in Russia's military architecture, which I think is pretty clear. But, in these, right, on top of the strikes
Oh, yeah.
into proper.
Yeah, it's no surprise. I mean, Russia lost control of the Black Sea early in the war. They had to relocate their naval fleet out of range of Ukraine because Ukraine just kept sinking them and they couldn't do anything about it. And so obviously Ukraine has always had the ability to sink Shadow Fleet tankers whenever they wanted to, or, maybe not sink, but just they could sink them. But right now they're disabling, not sinking them. They've always had the ability to do that. And so it's not really a question of military capability. It's rather a question of geopolitics and why Ukraine is willing to do this now. Ukraine is obviously taking the gloves off. And I think it's because, well, there's a lot of reasons. I could do very long videos on this, but long story short, the risks associated, the geopolitical risks associated with Ukraine striking the Shadow Fleet are no longer looming as present because, first of all, some of those risks have already happened and it seems like Ukraine can't do anything about it either way. And second of all, as I mentioned, Ukraine is also just less dependent on other countries for support at this point of the war than they were earlier on in the war. They can produce the core capabilities they need for themselves. And so now it's kind of an equation. It helps their strategy more to accelerate the destruction of the Russian economy by putting pressure on the Shadow Fleet than it would potentially hurt them by losing, major partners if major partners were upset by them doing that.
But Paul, I mean, just bluntly, do you not think you're being too optimistic about Ukraine? It can do all this, but Russia can't do anything. Like, Russia has taken Pokrovsk effectively, right? Isn't that a big deal?
Not really. I mean, Russia took Bakhmut. The media focused on that for a long time. Russia lost hundreds of thousands of people. They finally took the city, and then it took them a long time to take Avdiivka. And then after they took Avdiivka, they've been sitting outside Pokrovsk for a long time. It took them a long time, and they haven't taken Pokrovsk, but, the media has been telling us for months that they have. Eventually, they probably will, but, that tells you something in and of itself. The media, rather than being too optimistic about Ukraine, what they do is they prophesy the loss of a Ukrainian city, and it actually takes like a month to years longer than the media thinks it will. And so, no, I don't think I'm being too optimistic. What happens if Russia takes Pokrovsk? From a practical level, of course, it's a loss, but Ukraine has many of their larger fortress cities behind that line. They've had many years to develop more layers. It's highly possible that Ukraine may just have decided to not put as many, soldiers and resources into the fight for Pokrovsk, so they experience less casualties because they want to trade land for time, because for them, the front line is not how they're going to end the war. The front line is just how they hold back Russia's advances for as long as possible. How Ukraine is going to win the war is the things in the rear, taking down the Russian economy, weakening the Putin regime and the minds of his people, all these things that we've talked about. And so when you understand where the actual war is taking place, the front line is where the combat is taking place, and I don't want to diminish the sacrifices that happened there. But where the actual war is taking place in terms of what is actually going to push things over the line to cause one side or the other to actually concede something, that's taking place, for example, with Shadow Fleet tankers, strikes on refineries, all those other sorts of things.
So you don't, just to clarify, so you don't agree with Douglas McGregor that because the Ukrainians have targeted the Black Sea and a couple of tankers, the Russians are now going to take Odessa in a couple of weeks? I think that's what he said. I'm being slightly facetious in my delivery, but that's what is he talking about?
I haven't seen those remarks, so I can't say one way or another, but if that's what he's saying, no, I don't agree.
Oh,
if Russia could take Odessa, they would have done it like forever ago.
No, 100%. Because I mean, personally, in my mind, I think that we covered this in our first conversation. But in my mind, I think the Russians are primarily after Novorossiya, to cut off southern and eastern Ukraine. It feels a lot of their strategic, ideological, and economic interests. But yeah, they can't. And all this rhetoric around that Russia is going to your point, try to do something against Europe. Right? Putin's remarks earlier in the week threatening Europe, which I made a video about this when they had the peace talks, right? Because it was quite revealing for two reasons. Firstly, the Chinese were in the room. And if people want a deeper dive as to why that matters, go and watch part one. But it's interesting that Wang Li, the foreign minister, was there. doesn't have to be that they coincide on the same day. But two,
Yeah.
Putin was clearly rattled because he doesn't come out of a press conference and then start very purposely targeting the group of countries that apparently have been irrelevant up until now. Europe, right? It's always been, I'll talk directly to the United States. Sod Ukraine, they're not important, and Europe is irrelevant. But the fact that he's now threatening Europe clearly shows he's getting irritated because they are willing to still be a spanner in the works of this Trump-Putin preferred outcome, right? Do you agree with that, or am I missing something?
Well, Putin's clearly rattled. I think even just psychologically, when you look at these tough guy personas, the more rattled they are, the more they lash out, the more they threaten. And threats aren't a show of strength, although they think they are because that's how their psychology and their personality works. But threats are more of a show of weakness. They're lashing out. They don't know what else to turn to. And so I think you're exactly right. Obviously, Putin is rattled. There's too many things going on for him not to be rattled. And if he's not rattled, then he's not being told what's going on or he's an idiot. Like, those are the three options.
Well, I think that not being told, I think, is definitely part of it, right? We know that he hasn't been told military things.